Good morning. Good morning. Okay, why am I still hearing music in the background? Oh, I know why. Because I don't have that audio shut off. All right. This stream, we're going to be talking mostly about one House committee meeting and how badly the Democrats want to build loopholes into laws, especially immigration law. Democrats really want to so badly just absolutely destroy immigration law. Keep these borders wide open. Make as many exceptions to the law as possible. All right. So let me see here. I'm going to be spending most of my time on the other screen. I need to bring up my channel here on my phone so I can keep an eye on who's coming in and when. All right. Okay. And let's see here. Oh, no. I shared. Yeah, I shared the wrong screen here. But hey, Dar.
Ahoy.
Share screen. There we go.
Yeah, that
Okay,
last
here.
looked like Inception going on there.
Yeah, that was some pretty wild stuff there for a second, wasn't it? Okay, here we go. The House Judiciary Committee debating the GOP's Border and Security Enforcement Act of 2023. As you can see, this is 48 minutes long, and the whole thing is discussing one amendment by the Democrats. So, and the nonsense the Democrats are pulling out of their ass to try to get this thing through is just, it's amazing to me. This will be the fourth or fifth time here that I've listened to this in the past couple of days. So, Dart, if you want to jump in on anything, just tell me to pause it. Okay.
Definitely will, because I don't think my pea brain can take 48 minutes of Congress.
Well, you got something to jump in on this, just jump in. The whole thing is the excuses the Democrats come up with here and the games they try to play. I mean, they sound like, I'm going to be honest, I'll tell you right now, they sound like a bunch of kindergartners.
Yeah.
They really do. All right, here we go.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk, amendment number 7.
Clerk will report.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Mr. McClintock, offered by Ms. Lofgren of California.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order. Gentleman from California reserves a point of order. Gentle lady from California is recognized.
This amendment is simple. We should exempt people fleeing from communism and totalitarian dictatorships from this legislation, and we should allow them to apply for asylum as our laws intend. Now, there's been some confusion about this bill. However, I think it's important to be clear that as it stands right now, the bill would shut down asylum to the United States. Let me explain how that would work. This bill would...
Okay. Bill.
That's not what that bill does.
Go on.
Well, they're not trying to shut down asylum or anything else. What they are trying to do is stop this influx of people.
Trying to tell them if you want to claim asylum, you can't come to the border and do it if you pass through other countries. You have to go to those other countries' embassies.
Yeah.
and U.S. government buildings to put in your application. You can't illegally come up from Honduras, cross multiple borders, and then illegally enter the country, then all of a sudden claim asylum.
Pretty much.
So, okay.
Require the DHS secretary to detain all asylum seekers or place them all in a remain in Mexico type program. If the secretary fails to do this, DHS must suspend the entry of all migrants. Now, no Congress under either Republican or Democratic leadership has ever appropriated resources that would allow the detention of all migrants or has ever directed DHS to place every migrant in a remain in Mexico.
All right. It's not every migrant. It's those claiming asylum. It's detaining every migrant that claims asylum. The Democrats are amazingly good at this. They read the law as it is. And then they turn around and say it says multiple times that it says something completely different from what it actually does say. They lie constantly about what the law is saying. They leave out important words or they add
Yes,
words.
they do.
Mexico program. Even former President Trump never tried to detain all migrants for the duration of their proceedings.
And it's not all migrants. It's illegals. Deport illegals, deport or detain all illegals.
See, and that's that's the crux of the matter. They keep saying migrants. They're not migrants. They are illegally entering the country. Now, if they come to a port of entry and apply and follow the rules, then they are no longer illegals. Then they truly are migrants and can be treated as such. But you see, you notice how the language that they use a language very to their advantage.
And they say it's much like when if you said the Parental Rights Act of 2022, you'd have no clue what bill I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But if I said the Don't Gay Say bill, you know exactly what bill I'm talking about. The Democrats and the media twist things and rename things and get those words out so much that their choice of verbiage is what becomes ingrained into the populist mind as to what is being spoken about. So they are now framing the issue the way they want it framed. And damn be he that brings it up the correct way.
His fiscal year 2021 appropriations request was for 60,000 detention beds. And in 2020, at the height of the pandemic and border closures, U.S. Customs and Border Protection.
Okay, hey, Spittle Buggies, I'm glad you showed up here, but please, take care of your father. He's much more important than us, all right? And yeah, everybody, let's keep Spittle Buggy's dad in our prayers. Things are rough in their household. So, however you believe, whatever powers you believe in, let's utilize them towards Spittle Buggy and his family. And I'll take this chance to say good morning to Sean and Neil.
Still processed 440,000 migrants in immigration proceedings. Further, as the Trump and Biden administration have noted, and as was confirmed by the Supreme Court, Mexico must agree to any Remain in Mexico style program.
Wrong. Mexico doesn't have to agree to it. hey, you guys just stay on that side of the border. We're not letting you cross our borders.
Yeah, stay where you're at.
Stay where you're at.
And if
Then, yeah,
Mexico
it's
doesn't
not.
agree, they can go elsewhere.
If Mexico doesn't want them, then Mexico can send them back, stop them at their borders.
Exactly. So that whole thing, we don't have to get any agreement from Mexico on the stay in Mexico, because we're not saying you have to let them stay in Mexico. We're just saying they can't come here.
Exactly. If you let them enter your country, that's on you, not on me.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with us.
Exactly right.
It can't be implemented unilaterally. Mexico opposes restarting the program. Because of this, the passage of this bill
Who gives a shit what Mexico opposes? It's to their betterment for us not to be having a secure border. It doesn't matter to Mexico. Mexico wants to send all send all these people. Mexico makes millions and billions of dollars a year off of America from money being paid to illegals being sent back to Mexico. And then, of course, through the drug trade and everything else. Mexico's making billions of dollars every year off the United States.
bill will result in the asylum system being shut down completely. Now, at one time, although there were disagreements between Republicans and Democrats, there was never a disagreement that we should provide safe haven to those who are fleeing from communism. When Saigon fell and Vietnamese fled from that communist regime, both Republicans and Democrats welcomed them. We put into law protection for Nicaraguans who were fleeing from communism, and the Cubans who fled from communism under Castro. They were welcomed by both Democrats and Republicans. We welcomed Russians who were fleeing from communism, as reflected in the Lautenberg Amendment. Venezuelans who are fleeing from that communist regime have been protected under the Biden administration's protective orders. This would turn our back on those who are fleeing from communism. That's
And at what point do we have to say that we will always accept every person fleeing a country for whatever reason?
Yep.
If we want to say we can't accept them, we also have the right to say all right, that's it. We can't accept any more. Yeah. Yeah, they did have Cubans used to have a wet foot, dry foot.
Yep.
I don't know is that still a law? Is that still in place?
Well, the Biden administration tried to stop all Cubans from coming. So they, all the Cubans that were coming in on boats and that, the Biden administration said, no, do not do that. Cubans, you're not allowed here. Because, because when Cubans come here, they tend to vote not for the right party.
Well, South Florida is sort of a toss up now between the Cuban people.
Yeah.
So it's sort of toss up back and forth. Hey, good morning, Data.
It's not the America I grew up in. Now, there are plenty of things that I disagree with in
None of us are in the America you and I grew up in. America has changed, and not necessarily for the better.
Not all things have changed for the better, that's for sure.
this bill. I consider it extreme in many regards. But I'm hopeful that at least we can find this common ground as we always have historically. Let us provide safe haven for those who are fleeing from communism and who want to come here and join us as Americans standing up for freedom. Those who are fleeing communist China, Russians, Nicaraguans, Cubans, Venezuelans, We should welcome them who are fleeing from communism and understand that people who flee from communism and who come to America do so because they value freedom, just as we do.
Will the gentlelady
This-
yield?
not until I'm finished. Although it's been represented that this bill does not, in fact, preclude application for asylum, as I have mentioned, because of its drafting, in fact, it will prevent these individuals who are fleeing from communism to have the capacity to apply for asylum, as we have always allowed. Now, there was a time when colleagues on both sides of the aisle claimed to oppose communism, claimed to oppose totalitarian dictatorships. We welcome people fleeing from these totalitarian communist regimes. I hope that we can come together once again to oppose communism and to stand up for freedom and to allow those fleeing these totalitarian communist regimes to file for political asylum in our country. And with that, I see my time has expired.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, first, I would withdraw my point of order.
Gentleman withdraws his point of order is recognized now.
First, this does not shut down asylum claims. In fact, it enhances our ability to process asylum claims by removing the incentives that millions of people have taken to file fraudulent claims, clog the system, and make legitimate claimants wait years and years to resolve their situation. I would remind the gentlelady that the law already requires that every person illegally entering the country and claiming asylum has to be detained. That is the law. As Justice Alito pointed out, shall be detained means shall be detained. The fact that this administration is thumbing its nose at that law, ignoring that law, refusing to see that that law be faithfully executed, doesn't change the law. What this measure does is to reinforce that law, but offer alternatives, including providing for other venues to wait in Mexico. The gentlelady is wrong that awaiting in Mexico requires Mexico's consent. Mexico admitted these people into their country, and it is to their country that they're being turned back. That was the decision that Mexico made when it admitted them. And by the way, the purpose.
That was the exact comment you and I said.
Yep.
That was exactly what we said. Any person with common sense knows that. Again, let's bring this down to your house. Just because I let somebody into my home doesn't mean the guy that lives next door to me has to let them into theirs.
This is correct.
Just because that guy next door let somebody into his house doesn't mean I have to let him in mine. Especially if that person broke into their house.
Well,
or broke into my house.
if someone comes into your house without your permission, I don't know about your house, but in my house, if someone comes into my house without permission, they get one warning. Get out or be shot. That's it. That's all they get. If they don't
get out or face a pew pew.
they are done. Plain and simple. End of story. There is no, you need to go next door and wait until I can figure out who you are before I let you in my house. No, you came in without permission. You need to leave. And
Exactly.
that's how that works.
I'm going to escort you off my property immediately.
Yep.
That just as we should be escorting every person that enters this country illegally to the nearest border.
Absolutely. Here it is. See that? Walk that direction.
And it's like in the Wolverine the Beginning movie.
Yeah.
At the end of it there, the general is told to start walking until his feet bleeds, and they keep on walking. That's what I every person that's entered this country illegally.
Of asylum is to separate yourself from a government that is deliberately persecuting you because of your race, ethnicity, or your religious or political beliefs. Once they have arrived in Mexico, they have a right to apply for asylum in Mexico because they have now crossed the border that separates themselves from the government that is persecuting them. They do not have a right to pass through various countries and to claim asylum in the United States. But this bill still allows them to do so. They just are either to be detained, be turned back to Mexico, which had accepted them in the first place, or also allows for safe third country agreements as well. MPP and safe third country agreements were in place under the Trump administration. They had successfully reduced the number of fraudulent claims to de minimis amounts. They were allowing us then to actually process the legitimate claims that now have to wait years for processing. And unfortunately, on his very first day in office, Mr. Biden terminated MPP.
Now, the Democrats complain about how long it takes. These people spend years in trying to get their citizenship. They spend years doing this. We need to revamp our system because it takes so long. Meanwhile, the Democrats do everything they can to clog up the system, to make it take long.
Unless it's something they want.
Well, yeah, because then they can turn around and revamp the system more and more, make it easier and easier, relax the requirements. And, at that point, then they can sit there and you owe your citizenship to us. Remember, at one time we had a president that when he started certain programs, he made a claim he's going to have a certain group of individuals voting for him for the next 40 years. Now, I'm not going to repeat the exact verbiage he used because that would get me a channel strike, but that's beside the point.
And shortly thereafter, the safe third country agreements that had been negotiated. Again, I want to emphasize this preserves the right of every person to file a claim of asylum. It simply requires, as the law does, that they be detained or they can be turned back and await a decision in Mexico or in any safe third country that the administration has negotiated with. So with that, I yield back.
Would the gentleman yield?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I yield to the gentleman from Florida.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding. In addition to the concerns the gentleman from California has shared, there seems to be a great deal of vagueness in the amendment. It requires, I guess, the department to assess what governments constitute communist or totalitarian dictatorships. And I'm left wondering, would someone coming here from Saudi Arabia be considered someone fleeing a totalitarian dictatorship?
Would the gentleman yield?
It's not my time,
Oh.
but if it's okay with Mr. McClintock.
I would just note that the Immigration Nationality Act itself has these provisions within it. It's nothing new.
Right. I guess so long as Mr. McClintock would allow it to continue yielding me the time. My concern is that that's a dynamic feature of governance in a lot of places, right? Like we've seen military coups in Guinea, Burkina Faso, Guyana. So in those places where there's a coup, is it considered a totalitarian dictatorship? I don't know. Is communist in the eye of the ball? Would someone fleeing from Canada
Of course
be
not.
afforded the provision?
Of course not. And
I don't know.
If the gentleman would further yield,
It's Mr. McClintock.
I need to actually reclaim my time to make one final point, and that is that we have watched this administration exploit any loophole they can possibly find in the laws to invalidate those laws. What the gentlelady's amendment does, in addition to other things, is to give them a huge loophole with which to undo the border security of.
That is exactly what that bill of theirs does. By saying, okay, any dictatorship, any totalitarian, any form of communism, any form of communism would include Canada, would include Great Britain. and most European countries, because they all are very socialistic in their operations. None of them are told. None of them are democratic or representative forms of government uh, in the best sense, shall we say? They, I mean, everybody wants to say, well, look at their healthcare system. Yeah, and you've got 40% of your taxes going to pay for that healthcare system. So, 200 years. Okay, was that it, Duck Dog? All right. So no, we're as this gentleman is saying, the Democrats are trying to build loopholes into the immigration law so that they can let as many people in as they possibly want, as they possibly can. 1,000 people a day is not enough crossing the borders, according to the Democrats. 1,000 a day is not enough. That's not an invasion.
Of our country. Again, every legitimate asylum claim can be filed, and under this bill will be expedited because it removes the incentives to make illegitimate, fraudulent asylum claims by ceasing to reward those who make them with admission, indefinite residency, indefinite work authorization, and all sorts of free goods and services.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh my
Mr.
God.
McClintock's objections.
You know who that was just by the
Yeah.
voice.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. The same guy that says Antifa does not exist.
Yeah. It's just an idea.
Right.
Make no sense. They assume that there is a third-party country. Let's take communist dictatorships like Vietnam or China or totalitarian regimes like Russia. There is no third-party country. They come directly here. From Russia, they could just go to Alaska. Exactly. They can see it from there. So the point is there is no third party. There is no necessary third country from.
And that's why they get detained or returned to their home country.
Yep.
You
exactly.
fat ass toad looking bastard. I'm sorry, your parents may have been married. Excuse me.
Many
The gentleman yield.
totalitarian and communist regimes.
Will the gentleman
Now,
yield?
if you're talking about regimes in Latin America, yes, there may be third countries.
I've got a question there for you, Mr. Nadler. What is the percentage of the illegal immigrants coming to the country, coming from Russia and paddling a boat across the Bering Strait to Alaska? What are the percentage of these people illegally trying to enter our country, getting on an airplane and flying from China or North Korea to the United States? Exactly what are the percentage of these illegals are you talking about? How many is this a year? I'd make a bet you could almost count the number of people illegally entering the United States without going through another country, be it Canada or Mexico. On what? Maybe two hands? How many? I mean, okay. Now I'm going to exclude Cuba from this because it's only 20 miles. They can make it across that 20 miles in rafts. They've been doing it for decades.
It's a little more than 20 miles, but yeah.
Okay, but are you sure? I thought it was only 20 miles from the closest point of the islands to Cuba.
No, I'm pretty sure it's a little further than that.
But anyway, but how many people who have entered our country illegally over the past, let's just go 10 years, 5 years, in the past 2 years have been a direct flight? Now, I'm not, now, are we talking about people who are overstayed their visas? That's a different story because they entered the country legally. They just overstayed their visas. That, I mean, making up excuses one way after another.
But if
The
you're
gentleman
talking
yield.
about most totalitarian and communist regimes, there are no third countries. So the objection to this amendment makes no sense. And yes, I'll yield.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'll yield to the gentlelady.
Yeah, I just want to briefly comment on the objections made. The Immigration and Nationality Act has various provisions relative to communism. Right now, if you're a communist, you're not admissible to the United States. The Department of Homeland Security and the Immigration Service makes a determination, an individual determination, that you might be inadmissible for that purpose. This is nothing new. Right now, they make a determination about if you're fleeing from communism. That is nothing new. They would not, under any circumstances, describe democratic countries as a communist regime. That's never happened, and it's not going to happen. This is really completely rooted in the current Immigration and Nationality Act. And I would just note, I understand the ranking member's point, but there are occasions when people present themselves at our border because they were unable to get travel documents into the United States, and they have a claim for political asylum that has always been righteous in the United States. They're fleeing from communism, and really because we have never, no one has ever, not Mr. Trump, not Mr. Biden, requested enough money to.
You notice how she says no one has ever, but she only mentions the last 2 presidents? She doesn't mention Obama. She doesn't mention Carter. She doesn't mention the Bushes. She
Nope.
doesn't mention Reagan. She doesn't mention Carter. I mean, there's a whole lot of presidents in this forever.
Yeah.
Incarcerate every single person who appears at the border. It has never happened. And
We don't say incarcerate. We say only incarcerate the ones we're going to keep here in the country and send the rest back.
Yeah.
When the illegals that we want to give a chance to stay, when those cells are full, when those beds are full, everybody else goes and stays back across the border.
And we're not talking about incarcerating. See, that's the thing. They're twisting words again.
Yeah, you're right.
And it couldn't happen, which means that the provisions in this bill that shut down the asylum provisions go into effect. And so all of these people who are fleeing from communism will not be permitted to present and to have their claim for asylum. And frankly, I find it of great concern that we would turn our back on our history of providing safe haven to victims of communism by saying, well, they went through a third country and therefore we're not going to provide haven. That we've never done that.
And we've never had 1,500 illegals crossing the border every day before. There's a problem here. What has happened in the past, what has not happened in the past, is happening today. We have 1,500 illegals a day crossing the border. And those are just the ones that we know about. How can we expect to take care of, house, feed, and everything else, and process that many people who are illegally crossing our border. You can't say all 1,500 of them people are crossing the border because they're from a totalitarian, uh, communistic country. You just can't say that. But that's what you're trying to say.
That's what they're making it out to be. Yes.
That's the excuse they're trying to use. Now, if you want to if you want to allow only those coming in from communistic countries, then let's stop all these other people who are, what do they call them, economic refugees.
Yeah, economic refugees.
Yeah,
But see,
let's
here's the other point
put an
that
end to that.
here's the other point I keep seeing missed, right? Um, and it's really frustrating to me is you have this group called the Coptic Christians, right?
Yes.
They live, in Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq and places like that. Now, if anybody should be given a shot at coming over here, it's those people. But you see, you notice that we never hear any discussion of those people.
No. No. Because they're not while they are a religious minority in their country, they would not be a religious minority in ours.
This is true, but they are being persecuted. And spittle buggies makes a great point. I think that we should um, acknowledge is he goes, Obama deported 3 times as many as Trump in 4 years. And so they're using a false equivalence again. Yes, and that is true because the first couple years of Obama's presidency, they called him the deporter in chief.
Well, see, they also changed the procedures for counting how many they deported, because they also include those that they, as being deported, as those who were turnaways at the border.
Right.
They weren't necessarily deported; they were turnaways, which had not been counted as being deported before. But yeah, Spill Buggy does bring up a good point there.
Well, Obama did. He deported a lot of people in his
But
first couple
but then
years.
Obama, up until his last year, also said, I believe it was 19 times, that he could not make dreamers. That the Dream Act would be
But he did, yeah.
unconstitutional.
But he did it anyway.
Right, but he said, I believe the count was 19 times that
Yeah.
it would be unconstitutional.
But he did it anyway.
Yep.
We didn't do it when the Vietnamese fled the communist regime. We didn't do it when the Cubans fled Castro. We didn't do it when the Nicaraguans.
Wait a minute. How many remember, again, she's lying here. Wet foot,
Yeah.
dry foot. The wet foot, dry foot policy. That was all about Cuba. We turned away Cubans under the wet foot, dry foot policy. Stop
Yes,
your
we did.
lying.
Nicaraguans fled communism, and I don't think we should start doing that now. And I thank the gentleman for yielding to me and yield back.
And I clearly, I clearly agree.
Committee will be in order.
And I clearly agree with the gentlelady, although I point out that the question doesn't even arise because many times there is no third country. But whether there is or not, she is correct. We ought to be admitting refugees from communism and totalitarianism. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To hear the ranking member impugn the argument of the gentleman from California as being absurd, and then to make one of the most bizarre arguments ever to say that there's no safe third country from people coming from communist states is absolutely some kind of Orwellian vision. It's clearly made from someone who doesn't get to the border, doesn't know the border, doesn't go down, doesn't talk to CBP, doesn't talk to agents, doesn't bother to interview literally hundreds of people who are coming across. Because I could tell you right now, let's look at the Tucson sector. Do you know outside of Mexico what
what the third highest country of origin is from individuals coming into the Tucson sector? South Asian Indians from India, for Pete's sakes. And why do they end up over in Tucson sector? I have no idea, because it's one of the most rugged sectors that you come across. And that's the give ups. We also have people from, like, I think it's over 100 countries already in this fiscal year in the Tucson sector. You go to Yuma sector and you meet people as you walk up, and they're from all over the world. I've met them from Russia, Ukraine,
Stop here.
Uzbekistan, Tajikistan.
So here's the thing when he said about Indians, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the largest groups that they're encountering come across Tucson is Indians. And why suddenly are Indians trying to come into our country illegally? That's the question, right?
Right.
Okay, so all the Indians that we have in our country that have come legally in that, because they were what is considered the best of the best, right? The best educated, the best at whatever it is that they did.
Not all, but most. You're right.
Yeah. So, you had to have some special skills and that sort of thing. And you had to have money in order to migrate to the United States. And so,
At one time, we didn't, if you migrated to the United States, you weren't allowed to get welfare, if I remember correctly.
I'm not even talking about welfare. Don't even care about that. It's not anywhere close to the point I was trying to make.
Okay.
But so in order to leave India to come to the United States, you had to have money and that sort of thing. So you usually got better educated people, and you got people at a higher social tier, right? Now with all these illegals, they just see this as an opportunity. I can get the hell out of here, because, these are your true economic migrants, these Indians now coming across. Because they see it as an opportunity to come here where there's more opportunity.
All right. Well, and a lot of them.
That was the only point I was trying to make.
I'm probably a little too close to that, because I know a lot of people in the Indian community here.
So do I.
And in the surrounding area, and I know a couple that have been deported. That basically because they overstayed visas.
Yeah, that's a big issue.
But I don't know of too many that actually crossed the border illegally.
Well, see, that's the thing. All right. In my work, what I do, I work with a lot of Indians. They all came here legally. But again, these were the people with the better education, skill sets, and that they came here legally. They came here originally a lot of them came here on H-1B visas and applied for citizenship and were granted citizenship. They did it the right way. Yeah, Data, you're right. There's a caste system in India. And these people that come over here legally are usually from a much higher caste. Like I said, they're usually the best of the best. So what's happening is the lower castes that normally would not have much opportunity to rise above like certain jobs and that are the ones coming over now, because they are truly economic refugees. They're coming here for the opportunities to have a better life. And this is where you get your people who are not exactly what you want.
Okay. Afternoon Fury.
That's the only point I was trying to make.
Right. And you do bring a good point up. And Duck Dog brings up a point that a lot of these Indians trying to enter illegally is Sri Lankan Tamils.
Yeah, Sri Lankan Tamils.
Sri Lanka, right? So, Okay. Yeah. Start a quick mart.
So when we start, see, and one of the biggest things that I really hate, and I'm sure they're going to talk about this, is the whole, well, we need these guest workers, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, if you look at Sri Lanka, right, they imported a lot of Indian guest workers because they needed guest workers. But the country of Sri Lanka has completely lost its national identity because of this. And then you look at Germany with all their Turkish guest workers. Germany's starting to lose their national identity as well.
Well,
But that's
look
just
at.
another.
Can you say London has a national or has still got its identity?
What's that?
Can you say London still has its identity that it's had for a couple hundred of
No,
years?
yeah, England's losing their national
Yep.
identity as well. I'm not saying they're
Well, I'm
not.
pointing specifically to London because of the absolutely massive numbers of immigrants living there.
Yep.
So, all right.
Tajikistan, they have like 150 countries that have come and been represented. And you can go up and you can ask them, why are you coming here? Where'd you come from? Many of them will tell you that we flew in to Mexico City or Cancun on a Mexican tourist visa. We then took a flight to Mexicali. Some have grabbed Ubers from Mexicali, came on over to Los Algodones or San Luis and walked across. What an absurd argument to make. There are many in almost every case, there is a safe third state, which is the international law. That's the norm. I'm going to yield to the gentleman from California.
Thank you. I'd also point out in response to the gentlelady that simply living in a communist country does not give you a right to come to this country. Under asylum law, you must have been singled out by that government for persecution because of your race, religion, ethnicity, or political or religious beliefs. In fact, in fiscal year 2022, the asylum grant rate for aliens from Cuba was 8%, with 86% of cases being withdrawn, not adjudicated, abandoned, or other likely adjustment. Grant rate for Nicaraguans, 26%, for Venezuelans, 34%, for Haitians, 6%. To the gentleman from New York, if someone comes directly to this country and not through a third country, the law requires them to be detained until their asylum case is heard. That is to assure that you don't have the perverse incentive to file a fraudulent claim and get immediate admission into the country. This administration, if memory serves me, has closed 7,000 detention beds and has another 6,000 vacant at this moment. In addition to that, this gives the other option of the administration negotiating safe third country agreements and having a safe haven for claimants to stay there as well. So the representations that are made on this bill are simply ludicrous. And what the Democrats are doing is making a mockery of legitimate asylum claims that are now impossible for us, or very difficult for us to process because they have to wait years because the Democrats have now engineered a system where fraudulent claims are absolutely glutting our courts.
Now I'm loving here that a Republican is standing up and calling Nadler out to his face. There's a couple of Republicans here growing some backbones and standing up and calling Nadler, calling Lofgren, calling these some of these people out to their face that you're lying. And
Yeah.
as we learned with MTG last week, you can't say that they're lying. You can't call them a liar. But you can't say they're making a mockery of it, which is what they're doing. Calling them what they actually are, lying. That's just a step too far. You gotta be nice about it here. Decorum rules sometimes prevent you from stating the truth. As much as it prevents somebody overstating something, it also prevents people from saying the truth about the situation sometimes.
Yeah, I would say most of the time.
But in a case like this, somebody should be standing up and calling Nadler and Lofgren out as being liars.
And I yield back to
Would the gentleman
from
yield?
Arizona.
I yield to the gentleman from California, Mr. Ice.
Yeah, I don't want to take separate time because I think we all know how this is going to end and appropriately. But, having a large section of the border and having seen those people from so many countries, I also have visited many of the countries that the ranking member is talking about. And I might remind people that America invests heavily in Vietnam, a communist country. America invests in many of these countries. As much as I oppose communism, half of all the Democrats, when we had a vote against socialism, wouldn't vote for denouncing socialism. I oppose it, but that doesn't mean that people there are automatically being persecuted or in some other way eligible for it. So I think the idea that the criteria is the governance of a country, particularly if you look at socialism, which there are plenty of democracies that are really pretty socialist, is certainly an undefinable term, and the gentlelady and the ranking member know that. And I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Gentleman's time expired. Yields back. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I speak in favor of Representative Lofgren's amendment. This is a very simple amendment that would exempt people fleeing.
All right. One thing, okay, this shift for brains here. Everybody needs to keep in memory, whenever this guy gets up and he says anything, that he told a bold-faced lie, claiming it was a phone call, transcript of a phone call between Trump and Ukraine. But it was nearly every word of it was a bold-faced lie, was never uttered by anybody.
Yeah.
And it is in the official record. And the weak-ass Republicans, I don't recall any of them standing up and asking for those words to be taken down, all right, or stricken from the record. I'm just going off memory. Go back, maybe Jim Jordan stood up and said something, but I don't remember. But then Shift for Brains here, when he was running it, he muzzled everybody that didn't agree with him, that was not on his side. This man went on national television tens of times, if not hundreds, claiming that he had firsthand evidence of Russian collusion.
Yep. He said that many times. Never showed it though. Huh, go figure.
And none of that evidence was ever presented to the American people. None of it was presented even in closed session. This man ran more closed sessions of the Judiciary Committee than anybody else, so that nothing that they said could be released to the American people.
Yeah.
During his Trump investigation.
Well, googly eyes, he just is crazy.
So keep this in mind. This man has a history of lying. A very recent history of lying. And I don't understand why he is still allowed to get up and lie without somebody calling him out.
I don't even know why he's still in Congress, to tell you the truth, but
Well, he's from California.
yeah, well, goes figure.
Okay.
Communist and totalitarian dictatorships from the provisions of this bill, provisions which essentially would shut down asylum. And the reason this bill shuts down asylum is it requires the Secretary of DHS to detain all asylum seekers, or failing to do so, require them to be placed in a Remain in Mexico type program. If the Secretary fails to do this, DHS must suspend the entry of all migrants.
All illegal migrants.
Yeah,
Like
see,
bag of ships.
that's where it's the language. I'm telling you, it's the language they use. So
And the reality
basically,
is,
that's a lie too, because they say all migrants. That's not the case. That's not what it is.
No, that's what I'm saying. This is why I'm playing this whole 48 minutes of this, because I mean, and just the number of lies told. But this isn't the only time they've ever done this. This isn't the only time they've done it in the past. This isn't the only time they'll do it in the future. Anytime the Democrats get up there, and I'm using the immigration bill because this is one we're all familiar with. This is one we're all familiar with, the immigration problems going on in this country right now, the illegal immigration problems. It's affecting us all. And this is one time where the Democrats should be standing up there saying, yes, there are problems when we need to resolve the problem of people crossing our border illegally. The problem is their idea is saying, fine, we just won't make them illegals. We'll welcome them. We'll change our laws to say that they're legal. That's what the Democrats are trying to do. They're trying to dismantle our immigration system entirely. They're trying to get rid of our borders.
Yep.
much as my colleagues may try to dispute this, they can't. Unless Mexico is willing to enforce a Remain in Mexico policy, it will not work. And they won't.
Mexico doesn't have to enforce anything. All Mexico has to do is enforce their own immigration laws. If Mexico enforces their own immigration laws and stops these people from entering their country at their borders, like they're supposed to, instead of escorting the trains and the caravans through the country to make certain that nobody peels off, if Mexico would enforce their borders, we wouldn't have our border problem as big of one. It's that simple. We would not have as huge of a border problem if Mexico enforced theirs. So once they're in Mexico, they're Mexico's problem. They're not our problem until we let them cross our border.
And so it's a fiction to imagine that that is a viable alternative, or that this would not have the effect of shutting down asylum. It would. And the tragedy that would mean for people fleeing communist countries and communist dictatorships would be enormous. I have a large population in my district of people that have fled communist China. I have also a significant population in the Vietnamese community that have fled communism in Vietnam. To the south of my district in Orange County, there is an even more substantial population of people that have fled communism in Asia. And I shudder to think of where they might be if the majority's provisions were the law when they came here or tried. And at a time when the autocrats are on the rise and dictatorships are on the rise, at a time when we are in an ideological struggle over democracy, the idea that we would shut our doors to people fleeing communist dictatorship is anathema.
All they have to do is put in asylum paperwork and follow our laws.
Yep.
Follow our laws if you want to come to our country.
Yeah, and each one of these Democrats is arguing against following the law.
And how surprised are we at that?
Not at all surprised.
You know, they
I support the communities that have come here in search of a better life, that have fled repressive regimes, the totalitarianism of China, which is on the march around the world as they make the case that American democracy doesn't work. When we shut our borders and shut our country to people seeking to lawfully obtain asylum here, it not only makes the job of those communist regimes easier, but it undermines our legacy, our proud legacy as a country that welcomes people fleeing dictatorship. So I'm proud to support my colleague's amendment. I want to continue to see people fleeing the regimes in Venezuela and in Cuba, in Nicaragua, in fleeing the communist regime in China and Vietnam or Cambodia, in seek of a...
You don't feel shit about these people. Stop your lying. Stop crying your alligator tears over this. You don't give a damn about that and about them. All you're caring about is dismantling our border, and any effort to strengthen the border laws, you're going to be against.
Yeah, and the whole reason for that is because they figure if they get enough people over here and get them to vote, that they'll vote for them and keep them in power. That's
Exactly.
what this all boils down to. And then wouldn't that be funny is if all these people coming here, especially from communist countries, voted the way they didn't like.
Well, look how
Then
angry
you
they
want to see
got.
how fast they would be imported
Look
or
how fast they
deported?
got mad at Cubans down in South Florida when so many Cubans came out and voted for Trump.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, look how angry they are at the number of Mexicans, first generation Mexicans, who are running for elective office as Republicans.
That's the reason they tried to stop the Cubans from coming. That's the reason Biden didn't want the Cubans coming.
No, the Democrats are nothing about everything they do. It's none of it has to do with love of country. None of it has to do with preservation of our country. None of it has to do with helping people. It all has to do with buying votes.
Oh,
and,
yeah, it
and
all
them
comes down to
keeping
power. Yeah, that's all it is. That's all any of this is.
And I'm not going to say the Republicans are a whole lot better on a lot of these issues, because the
They're not.
Republicans want to control power, keep in power also. But at least I'm going to say is most of the laws the Republicans are passing are for individualistic freedom and to keep our country secure.
All right, so I'm going to say this, and I know it's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, but what I'm going to say is this, is that the Uniparty, the party of Mitch McConnell and all those, they're all on board with what these Democrats are saying and everything, because they're all on board with that, status quo people. But there is a new breed of Republicans that are coming in that are actually trying to do things to protect our country and individual freedoms and all that.
And yes, there is. And and a lot of them I've got a lot of disdain for, not for what they're trying to do, but for how they're trying to go about doing it and what they say and how they say it. But if I was 30 or 40 years younger, I probably would not feel the same way.
See,
I've gotten older, and I'm
that's
not as
where
comfortable with the rabble rousing now as I probably was when I was in my 20s and 30s.
See, and that's where we disagree, because I'm all about the rabble rousing. I like the way MTG and Bobart and some of them are doing it. I know a lot of people, Monkey and all those people are, they're crazy and they're not making us look good. Yeah, see, I don't care. This is where I disagree with them. I like the way they're doing things. They need to keep it up. I'm all about it. I will support them.
What I wish is not that they wouldn't do it, but they would tone it down enough, just a little bit, to where they're, to take away that target off of them by the media.
Yep.
I mean, when you see MTG, right, it's like, get the hell out of DC chant that was happening here the other day with her. Or was it get out of DC or get out of New York? And all these people staying up there giving her the finger.
Yep.
All right. That is spreading across the internet, and you're seeing videos of 10, 15 people, little windows, all just saying, flipping off the finger, and MTG go home or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that means
and
she's having an effect.
right. But that is being replayed back through the media then. But anyway, it's feeding the trolls. All right. I don't believe in feeding the trolls.
Better life here. I want to make sure those doors of asylum are not closed. This bill would close them. This amendment would make sure that we exempt people fleeing those regimes, and I urge your support.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I oppose this amendment. I hope that all of my colleagues will do the same. And I just want to comment briefly on what Mr. Schiff said. I'm glad to hear our colleagues on the other side of the aisle acknowledge the obvious facts that communism is on the rise. Totalitarian regimes around the globe are on the march. But my friends, the reason that is happening is because we are projecting weakness on the world stage. As Ronald Reagan reminded us, we maintain peace through strength. A strong America, the perception of a strong America, is what has kept the terrorists and tyrants and dictators and communists at bay since World War II. But right now, we're projecting that we are not a great superpower, that we are not resolved to fight communism, we are not resolved to fight totalitarianism, and we need to do that. But the way we do that is not to erase our national borders, because if we erase our borders, then we have no national security. We have no strength here. We have no sovereignty. If you don't have a border, you don't have a sovereign country. So how could we be the great beacon of freedom to oppose these other regimes around the globe? Of course, we have great sympathy for people who live under these regimes. But listen, I'm just looking at the very text of Ms. Lofgren's amendment. It says, as was noted, it's very subjective language. This should not apply with respect to an alien fleeing a country, the government of which is controlled by a communist or other totalitarian dictatorship. That's a quote from her amendment. I just out of curiosity, I just Googled real quickly those terms. Communist nation, right? Wikipedia, okay, the great source of all things that is objective and true, of course. Just Wikipedia, they list 4 nations that are they describe as Marxist-Leninist states. That's China, Cuba, Vietnam. We know those. They list 14 countries that are labeled non-Marxist-Leninist states, but also totalitarian or communist in flavor: Algeria, Guyana, Nepal, Nicaragua, Tanzania, a bunch of others. And then they say there's a whole other category. There are multiple states with communist or socialist parties leading the government, sometimes together. Such states are not considered to technically be communist or socialist states because the countries themselves do not provide a constitutional role for their ruling socialist communist parties or deem socialism a state ideology. However, if the communists are running the country, then under the concern that's expressed here, all those people would need to flee and seek asylum. So, I mean, listen, so there's so many countries. There's a whole bunch on that list as well: Algeria, Angola, Honduras, Mozambique, Syria, Venezuela. It goes on and on. So
Would the gentleman yield?
I won't, because listen, I know you're going to give it an argument here, but I'm saying under the language that is presented here, all these countries I've listed and a whole bunch of others would be exempt from the bill. What we're trying to do is clean up the asylum system. We're trying to make it work. The people on this side of the aisle are in favor of a lawful, important asylum system. It's who we are in America. We're the most benevolent nation in the history of the world. We want to help those who are fleeing legitimate persecution, but you cannot erase the border, and you cannot put out a welcome mat and exempt people from half the countries around the world because they have bad leaders. We won't be able to be the strong nation that we have to be to stand for freedom and defend it if we do that.
Would the gentleman yield?
I will not yield. I will yield back my time.
Can you yield to me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yield to the chairman. I thought I couldn't interpret what you're.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. It seems to me that the amendments offered by our friends on the other side would keep what we currently have, the status quo, wouldn't change what's going on now. And what's going on now? Chaos.
Right.
We know it's chaos. It's been chaos for 28 months. There's no number, there's no figure, there's no stat, there's nothing you can look at that says it's not a chaotic situation. And the Democrats' amendments say, let's keep that in place. I think we should probably change it.
The amendment doesn't say to keep it in place. What the amendment does, though, that they're offering just opens such a huge loophole that it makes it damn near impossible to stop anybody. It makes nearly everyone in the whole world available to claim asylum because of how their country is ran. And by the way, good morning, Raman. I hope you're feeling so much better than you were the other day when I talked to you.
Oh, she's just getting out of bed.
So chaos, and it is pure chaos at the border. Again, 1,500 a day known to be crossing the borders illegally or attempting to cross the borders. That's not including the getaway number, which is you can guess to be easily twice that amount. And the Democrats do not don't make any lie about this. Democrats do not want border control. They do not want control of our borders. They want them wide open and let everybody through. And worse yet, everybody through and put on immediate government assistance.
Yep. Well, see, and that's the point. If you can get them in, put them on assistance, and to get them the right to vote, they will vote for you and keep you in power. That's the theory, and that's what they're trying to do. Anybody who says anything different is not telling the truth.
Remember, I've done 2 streams on this, and I'll do a third if I need to. Of what I do is copy down a list and have a graphic on it. There are several states and cities throughout this entire country that allow illegals to vote. In
local elections, yes, there are.
In local elections.
And
all right.
If there's spillage over into federal elections, well, that was just an honest mistake, but it still counts.
Right. So, yeah, there are, several cities and states allow illegals to vote. And Washington, D.C. wants to not only allow illegals to vote, they want to allow Chinese nationals who are here on governmental visas to vote. Washington, D.C., the bill that they tried to get through, and I think Congress killed it, would allow anybody who resides within the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C. to vote. And that would include people living in embassies and anything else. There was no exclusionary thing to it. All you had to do is live within the border, that 10 square miles. And as far as that goes, as far as I'm concerned, all right, fine. Let's cede back to the individual states everything but federal property. And that federal property being where people don't live there. Work offices and such only. All apartments, buildings, and everything else gets ceded back to the original states that the land originally came from. That'll give the citizens who work in Washington, D.C., a right to vote and representation, which is what they're crying about. It's just they'll be in Maryland and Virginia and where else? What other state was property taken from? But anyway.
That's what Mr. McClintock's bill does. It's combined bills that make the system work. Actually let legitimate asylum seekers get their adjudication done and enter the country from communist countries for wherever they come. But you got to do it the right way. You got to do it in a way consistent with the law. That's what this does. We heard from a sheriff in Yuma who said 30 years in law enforcement in Arizona said, what is the situation on the border? He said, it's the worst it's been in my 30 years in law enforcement. And that has happened. Mr. McClintock gave the numbers at the start of our hearing today. That has happened in literally 28 months. And it started on day one. And the Democrats say, keep that in place. I think the country wants us to change it. And guess what's happening? There's a whole caravan of more people coming when Title 42 goes away. We should maybe demonstrate that we're trying to fix the problem. That's what this bill does. And I want to thank Mr. Johnson, Mr. McClintock, and our whole team who worked on this to put together something that changes the chaos that we all know is currently happening on our southern border.
Mr. Chairman, reclaim my time, 10 seconds. I authored the asylum provisions of this bill.
Yep.
And I've been bringing this language since I got to Congress 7 years ago. It's about time we fix it so that it will work again. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California seeks recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I oppose communism. That's why I support this amendment. And now I'm going to yield my time to Representative Schiff.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I won't need all of the time, but I did want to respond to my colleague on the other side of the aisle who asked the question, why is there a increase in totalitarianism and a rise of strongman dictators around the world? And his suggestion was, well, this is because we have a Democrat as president. But I will remind my colleagues.
No, that's not what his suggestion was, but it's true. It's true. Why do we have such chaos? Because Mayorkas and everyone in DHS and everybody else is refusing to enforce the laws as they are written. They are claiming they have the right to ignore certain laws because they don't want to enforce them. Prosecutorial discretion.
Colleague wasn't a Democrat as president who was exchanging love letters with Kim Jong-un. It wasn't a Democrat as president that thought that we ought to cozy up to a North Korean totalitarian regime.
What did he call him? Little Dick or something like that? Your missiles, your missiles may work, but ours are better.
He called him Rocket Man. He goes, yeah, we have missiles too, but ours work.
Right. He wasn't exactly cozying up to him.
No.
And actually, by using the Oriental mind frame, when Trump walked across that border, something no other president ever did, he was claiming that land for the United States.
Yeah. Well, he walked to a certain point and made the other guy walk to him.
Yeah, but Trump crossed the border.
Yes, he did. And yeah, basically he was staking his claim, but he crossed that border to a certain distance and made Kim Jong-un walk to him, which is another show of power.
Yes. He made Kim Jong-il or whatever his name is succumb, show deference to him. That's Trump to put it bluntly, Trump whipped out his dick and slapped the guy across the face with it.
Yeah, pretty much.
And did it on the world stage.
Yep.
I hate to be, you guys know me. I don't like being that graphic about it, but that's about what it was. It couldn't have been any worse if he made Kim get on his knees and crawl over.
And described correspondence with the leader of the supreme leader of that country as beautiful and wonderful. That wasn't a Democratic president, nor was it a Democratic president that cozied up to the Kremlin dictator, that stood in Helsinki side by side with the Kremlin dictator and said that he trusted the Russian dictator more than his own intelligence agencies.
You mean the intelligence agencies that stood up and said, yes, there was Russian collusion? You mean the intelligence agencies that stood up and said that that lied to FISA courts? You mean the intelligence agencies that illegally
Biden's laptop was not real?
They illegally tapped his telephone lines at the Trump Towers. And you mean the same Russian dictator that didn't do shit for 4 years, and as soon as a Democrat got in office, invaded the Ukraine? You know, when Obama was president, he went in and took Crimea. Crimea?
Crimea.
Crimea.
Crimea River.
uh, Under Obama, then sat silent and didn't do anything, didn't move a whisker for 4 years. And then as soon as Biden's in office, invades the Ukraine.
Yep.
Come on there, shit for brains.
It wasn't a Democratic president that sought at every stage to undermine NATO, to berate NATO, to weaken NATO.
Oh, you mean the same NATO that he made every country actually start putting their money to that they were supposed to, because they weren't paying their fair share of NATO's expenses, that they weren't dedicating the troops or the equipment that they were supposed to NATO. You mean that? Schiff?
The most incredible gift we could give to totalitarian regimes around the world. It wasn't a Democratic president that so frayed and often tore apart our alliances with other countries, that made it politically less than viable even to be associated with the presidency of the United States.
Oh, you mean the countries, the socialist leaning countries that, well, in order to look good in the press, because don't forget the press around the world, not just in the United States, but around the world, were against Trump. Because they loved him when he wasn't a president, but once he became president and started making America look good again, standing up for America, standing up for this country, and not being the world's piggy bank, and not doing everything that every other leader in the world wanted him to do, then they, oh my God, we got somebody that actually puts America first. We can't have that. We got to have an America that bows their head to everyone else. They come to our beck and call.
That was a Republican president. It was under the last administration that we saw this rise of the autocrat, and those autocrats were embraced, whether they were autocrats like Bolsonaro in Brazil or Duterte in the Philippines or Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And at a time like this, when democracy is being challenged, this is the last time when we should decide that people seeking asylum from these dictatorships and these totalitarian regimes, that we're going to turn our back on them. And we're going to say, if you don't remain in Mexico, then you don't get to come here.
Saying if you follow our laws, then you can come. But you have to follow our laws. You want to come to our country, you want to come to our home, you have to follow our laws.
It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter whether you're fleeing communism or not. All that rhetoric about being tough on communism, well, none of that really matters. And so through this underlying bill, we're telling people in those regimes, you better stay where you are. Because the doors to the United States, for those who are seeking to lawfully immigrate into this country, are closed. Because it's just good politics to close those doors. That's what this underlying bill says. It's good politics to close our doors to people seeking to flee repressive regimes. And all the talk about standing up to communism and standing up to China, is just talk. The politics is just too good to be resisted. Well,
God, this guy's full of it.
Yeah,
we're going to
he spews
maintain our
so
legacy
much
as a country that
fecal matter.
welcomes refugees from these tyrannical regimes. This is the wrong way to do it.
You know, I know several people, several hundreds of people across our northern border that feel that they're under a tyrannical regime because they've had their bank accounts closed because they disagreed with the government and they peacefully protested. They lost their jobs. They had their passports made null and void. They lost their bank accounts, all because they dared to protest peacefully against their elected leaders. I would call that a tyrannical regime, or at least the good footprints of one.
And I once again urge support for the Lofgren Amendment. I yield back.
Would the gentleman yield from?
I yield to the gentlewoman.
Well, actually, it's Mr. Lewis.
I will yield to Representative Lofgren.
I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. I think all of us would be better off if we looked at the Immigration and Nationality Act for guidance rather than Wikipedia, much as I love Wikipedia. The definition of communism is not new in the Immigration and Nationality Act. It is used to exclude people who are communists, and it has been used historically many times to allow for the approval of asylum applications when someone is fleeing from a communist regime. This is nothing new. It's nothing it's nothing exotic. This is what America has done for many years. This bill would shut that down. Because of the way it's crafted, nobody is going to be able to submit an application to see whether they are legitimately fleeing from persecution from a communist regime. That is at odds with our history. It is at odds with our promise as the land of freedom and the beacon of hope. And I think it is simply a very extreme mistake for this Congress to take that step. And I yield back to the gentleman. Thank him for.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, all this here turn in political debates, but we do have a real problem at the border. You know, as someone who actually lived in communist country under totalitarian regime, someone who came here as a legal immigrant and has an enormous amount of friends who actually escape this dictatorship, I am very disappointed that we cannot have a healthy conversation. And a lot of my friends, a lot of people in my district, like people from Nicaragua, are telling me, Victoria, what can we do? We have legitimate people in life and death situation that cannot come this country legally. We have some Ukrainian refugees that they have to go through the border illegally because they cannot get here legally. And if somebody's coming from totalitarian regime from Russia, doesn't mean that they are actually prosecuted by Putin. We have to make sure that we tighten the processes. What this bill does, it's misrepresented here. The bill actually disincentivizes the president not enforce the law for legal people that want to come to this country, contribute to our country, who love freedoms to actually come into this country. Because it says we need to find the processes, we need to tighten the processes to help legitimate people. And if you cannot figure out, then you have to shut down the border. And that is the last resort. And we need to push on president to start doing this and not wait till last resort, because what's happening in the country, it's insanity. We do not know who's coming into the country. And this is danger, national security danger. We have human drug trafficking, child trafficking, and women trafficking, enriching cartels. And we're not fighting that and let Mexico to get away with that. Now in cahoots with China, harassing our farmers, not enforcing law. We do nothing about it. But then we have, people that actually have legally want to come here and want to do and be what made this beauty of this country, what brought to all of the people that love this freedoms. We're not able to actually process that. They have to wait for years. It's happened the same as Afghanistan. We abandoned some allies and people that tried to help our country and brought some people with challenges. We didn't even go through the proper system, and now we're not dealing with that. I think our legal system is so broken. And this is not politics. This is a people's life. It's a life and death situation because lawlessness can hurt people within our country, and also us not be able to help people with legitimate claims. It can have them die. And we're still talking politics. We're not running a presidential election here. We, as an independent branch, have to oversee our presidents, regardless who they are, Republican and Democrat, and call them out if they're not enforcing the law. And we need to tighten the law that it doesn't allow president to abuse the law, to abuse intent in the law. So what is this bill does is tighten the law to make sure that it's not abused and actually serves with the people. And we have to put some ways, enforcement mechanism for president to say, you know what, if you cannot figure it out what to do, then you will not be able to do these processes. So it disincentivizes and deter our executive branch to be dysfunctional and not doing what they're doing. I truly believe we don't have enough enforcement mechanisms, to actually do the right thing and do the things that legally, it's becoming impossible to do anything legal in this country. This is like mob rule. This is like lawlessness. We're becoming a country where we have bandits running the show in our cities. I think this is awful for the people. And then we want to take rights from law-abiding citizens. This is insanity. This is what dictators do. That's what they try to do, to centralize power. And I truly believe this institution should have a capacity on a bipartisan basis to agree how we can improve some of these processes. Not try to politics because we play in politics with people's lives. And this is not just life, it's a life and death situation. This is a real serious issue that we're not willing to address. How we can secure the border, improve the processes, and benefit our national interest. We will help a lot of great people to contribute to our country. And I'm sick and tired of all of these worthless debates about voting and everything else. I hope Congress at some point will start be able to govern. And as unfortunately, we're turning into real circus with the clowns here doing political messaging in these committees. It's embarrassing for me on behalf of the American people. And I hope at some point we can get together and find some common ground. I yield back.
Lady yields back. The question occurs on the.
That woman spoke with more common sense, more emotion, more pure legal. She boiled it all down to more than what anybody else up there had said.
Yeah, she said more in that little small clip than they said in the whole thing.
Just about. She called everybody out. She wasn't playing politics. She wasn't playing partisanship. She was calling everybody out on that. And what's a shame is it took somebody who came in as a legal immigrant, got elected to office, to do it.
Yep.
Not one native-born American on the Republican side got up there and said as much as she said. Now, did some make good points? Yes. There are some up there that said good points. But they did not have the emotional drive in their speech, is what she said. Her speech needs to be replayed over and over and over again. Because she shamed everybody in that.
She did. And they deserved it.
Yes, they did. And when she called everybody a bunch of clowns up there, the first time I heard that, I actually had to stop the video right then and there and back it up and play it again. Because I was just absolutely ecstatic to hear that.
The amendment offered by the gentlewoman from, did you want to go? The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I thank the chairman. and I'll try to keep it brief. I don't know that we need to repeat too much of what's been said, but my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are presenting false propositions with respect to the claim that individuals will not be able to claim asylum. It's just not true. It's just simply not true. And that it's not true under when President Trump was in office. It's not true that you can't claim asylum now. But I will say that under the current system being run by the Biden administration, flooding the system is making it much more difficult for people with legitimate asylum claims to be heard. That's the truth. Those are the actual facts. And putting forward something to seem like it's doing something by saying, oh, we're going to do this for certain individuals from communist countries, so it seems like we're doing something to help individuals. We allow 1 million odd people every year to have green cards coming to the United States of America. We have a very robust legal system. We have had tens of thousands of people from communist countries come to the United States under our legal system. But by allowing the illegal system to undermine our ability to secure the border, we are making it extremely difficult for people to come here legally. When people come here and claim asylum, and we have everybody claiming asylum because this administration has said, and my Democratic colleagues have countenanced, that if you come to the United States and you claim asylum, you will be released into the United States. That is precisely what the Democratic policy is. The fact of the matter is the legislation that we're putting forward would make it clear that an individual can claim asylum and that we would process them much more efficiently and effectively under current law. Under current law, individuals are supposed to be detained. That's the truth. And the data of what we're experiencing right now is actually astounding. We're talking about the number of people who are Chinese nationals that have been stopped at our border. Talking about the number of people who have stopped that are in the terrorist screening data set, the 98 aliens from 2022, or the 69 aliens in the first 5 months of this fiscal year on the terrorist screening data set.
He brought up the number earlier, and I meant to stop it, but he brought up earlier the number of green cards that we issue every year. He said 1 million green cards a year. That's not the exact number. It's damned close. That is 1 million people a year allowed to enter our country and stay for, that's not a visa to enter. That's actual green card to live in the United States. Legal immigrant. I've worked with people in the military on a green card. They weren't U.S. citizens. They were not U.S. citizens. In fact, both of them were Mexican citizens working on fighter aircraft and in the service. Well, one was Mexican, one was German.
Yeah.
And what was so funny about the poor guy that was German was he was stationed in Germany at the same time I was, obviously. And he got drafted into the German army while serving in the U.S. Air Force.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about total legal conflugal going on. You have two countries trying, one trying to keep the guy in their service and the other guy trying to get him in theirs.
Well,
I
worked in space one time where you had to even enter the space, you had to be a U.S. citizen with a secret clearance. And when you go into that space, on the wall, there was a list of all the foreign nationals on the ship.
Right.
And so we had people from Canada, we had people from England, we had people from all over the world that were not allowed to go into that ship, into that space, because they were foreign nationals.
Yep.
So there's a lot of, you would be surprised how many foreign nationals are in our United States military.
You know, and that's one of the things here that I don't, yeah, it's brought up later here.
Remember that it was the Biden administration that suspended the migrant protection protocols, which led to a surge in illegal border crossings immediately upon President Biden coming into office. It was he who decided to suspend the migrant protection protocols that caused the surge, which actually endangers migrants and floods our system. It is this administration which is staring down in May to the end of Title 42. Title 42, which has been used to turn away half to 2/3 of the 2.7 million single people encountered at the border. Think about that. All during a time when there has not been a COVID emergency. They've been using it for border enforcement and now want to claim that if we have policies in place to ensure that we're going to follow the law to detain, process legitimate asylum claims, and then have a process for returning to Mexico if there's not detention capacity. Precisely the way we are kind of using the authority under Title 42, which many of my Democratic colleagues have said they support. That somehow that's anti-migrant. That somehow that's anti-asylum. When we are processing thousands of legitimate asylum claims every single day. It's simply not true. And the American people need to know that it's not true.
And the Democrats and the media will not let the American people know it's not true because it doesn't fit their narrative. It does not fit the narrative that they want.
And I oppose this amendment.
Gentleman yields back. About a question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote requested. The clerk will.
I skipped past all the votes, I hope.
Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Gates, you're not recorded. Mr. Gates votes no.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chair, there are 8 ayes and 21 noes.
The amendment is not agreed upon. The gentleman from Texas is recognized for an amendment.
All right. And that's the end of that.
Oh my God, that took forever for nothing.
No, it wasn't for nothing. I disagree with you that was for nothing. That is an example. And that is a very short example. I mean, it was only 48 minutes of the talking back and forth. I've listened to this go on for 4, 5, 6 hours. But that is a prime example of how the Democrats in the House right now are trying to build loopholes into our laws to suit them. Not to protect our country, not to make things better for American citizens, not to make things right, fair, equal across the board for everybody, not to hold up standards, not for anything except for them to have a better chance of gaining and getting power and keeping power. And I thought it was in this one, but probably was in another one. There is one problem with our immigration system as I see it, and I'm of two minds of this. And you and I both talked about it there very briefly. We touched on it. Is uh, U.S. veterans from mostly Mexico, but other countries. Like I said, one from Germany, but he was dual citizenship, so that was one of the issues there. He was dual citizen. Um, but there's a lot of U.S. veterans who are not citizens, and when their visas are up and they haven't reapplied, or for one reason or another, they've had DUIs, they've broken the laws in other ways, shape and or forms, they're deported and sent back across the border because for one reason or another, they've done something or failed to do something. And it's like, well, it's shameful. It's a shame that we've kicking these veterans, people who've served this country, and kicked them out. Well, I'm of two minds. I agree. It is a shame that we've got these U.S. veterans and some who are retired veterans who've been deported back to Mexico. And I sit there and shake my head and I wonder about it. But then I also have to wonder if these people, especially ones who spent 20 years in the Air Force or the Army or the Marines or the Navy, they spent 20 years in the military. Why didn't they ever become a U.S. citizen during that time period? Why didn't they take the responsibility and the steps to become a U.S. citizen?
Yeah. They had plenty of time to do it.
And if they'd become a U.S. citizen, then they wouldn't have been deported for getting a DUI or being arrested at a protest or whatever caused them to be deported, whatever violation of either immigration laws or other laws that caused them to be deported. Yeah, I mean, if you're serving in the military and you've passed the background checks and everything else to be in the military, do I think veterans maybe should have a leg up, or those who are actively serving and have served for at least 4 years have a leg up on becoming a U.S. citizen? Hell yes, I believe they should. All right. Because they did serve in the military. They did undergo training. They did prove their allegiance to our country. And they're proving their allegiance by wanting to become a citizen. So should they go to the head of the line to become a U.S. citizen? Hell yes. But they have to take that step and show that they want to become a U.S. citizen. And if they don't take that step to show they want to become a U.S. citizen, then why should I feel sorry for them if they get deported? It's, it really breaks my heart when I see these stories. And I've seen a lot of stories about it. I've seen, the stories of the people staying at the border with their uniforms on. And I'm going on the assumption that that this isn't stolen valor type stuff, that they actually did serve. They got an actual DD 214. They didn't get a chicken wing dinner.
Yeah.
Okay. Chicken wing dinner, bad conduct discharge. So, these people, They had the chance to become U.S. citizens. And that's what pisses me off about these dreamers. These dreamers have the chance to become U.S. citizens while they're living here. I mean, it's been 10 years now. Why haven't they done anything to become U.S. citizens? But they want to sit there and say, well, I'm a dreamer. I want to stay here in the United States. We got, Congress critters. Well, they're brought here as children. They should be able to stay. Well, if I rob a bank and I give put the money in the bank under my son's name when he's an infant, does he get to keep the money? No. That money still goes back because it was stolen. Whether he's had that money for 20 minutes or 20 years, it doesn't matter. That money was still stolen. And it's the same way with the people, these so-called dreamers. Their position, everything that they've got while they live in this country is because they've stolen it. All right, I'm sorry, Dar, what was that?
That was me saying I have to drop.
Oh, okay. Well, I need to drop too anyway. It's coming up on 2 hours. All right. Okay. Before we go, no, citizenship does not guarantee citizenship.
No,
Service
that's
does
true.
not guarantee citizenship. All right. Just a footnote, programming note here. All right. The month of May. All right. The first 2 weeks of May, the program is going to be sketchy at best. I've got my in-laws coming in. They've basically given us this much notice that they're coming down to visit, and my wife can't get time off work. So I don't know how much time they're going to give me for streaming. So that's going to be that's going to it's going to be all up in the air, to be honest. Okay, the first couple weeks of May. So I don't know what all is happening. It's like I said, my father-in-law. He's on. At first, it was just going to be my father-in-law. That was no problem. He can sit down in front of the TV for 2 hours. But now that his wife is coming down, and their friend is coming down, so it's going to be 3 of them. I don't know. That's going to be even more interesting. So I don't know what all is going to go on those 2 weeks. So, but anyway, Dar, thank you for coming out. I do appreciate you hanging in here with me today. Ladies and gents, I hope you understand why I decided to use this whole 48-hour thing today. Because rather than just using snippets. That is what I listen. That is actually the short form of what I listen to almost every day. And when I do use the congressional hearings and such, I usually edit them down to different areas so that you don't have to listen to it all and listen to everybody who gets up there and spews or opens their pie hole. But I wanted you to hear this today, especially Lofgren herself, Nadler, Schiff, and then that young lady that at the point I can't remember her name, the one who gave the absolutely rousing oration there. So, but anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming in. 48 hours, not just a film. Yeah. I want to thank everybody for coming in tonight. I do appreciate you. And please, be with the ones you love and love the ones that you're with. Have a good day.